Hi everyone, here's a quick video on family communication during distance learning. There's a lot of variation between the schools and how you currently approach communication, and so this video isn't necessarily a how-to, but I'm just going to bring up some points that you need to talk about as a school so that you can do any pre-work as a school that you need to get parents and families ready for the possibility of distance learning, as well as decide how you will consistently communicate together. Again, my name is Lana Peterson. I'm from the University of Minnesota. We're going to talk a little bit about distance learning. So what even is there to communicate? What is effective communication? What does our experience tell us from last year and what we know? And then how to use Seesaw for communication. Again, this is our distance learning 2.0 model. So when we're thinking about what now looking at this slide and focusing in on parent communication, family communication, caregiver communication, what might parents need to know? Wanting to know maybe what lessons, what topics that you're focusing on, when live sessions will happen, maybe if there's a special activity happening within a live session, and then any impacts or just reminders of the structured schedule and what is provided there to their student for live sessions. Effective family communication. So what we learned from the spring is that families were generally overwhelmed with the amount of communication. We want to provide just enough information and really focus on the need to know over the nice to know. In elementary school, we're known for our newsletters, our star of the week, all this additional information. And during distance learning, we're just going to let that go a little bit. We're in the middle of a pandemic, a major election. There's a lot of stuff going on. So let's provide provide parents and families just enough information so that they know how to support their child's education for the week. And that's it's a balance because some parents want to know how their student is being provided the same quality of education that they were face-to-face. And just striking that balance again so that parents don't feel overwhelmed. Using consistent methods for communicating with parents. This is really what you need to discuss as a school. Some schools are already using Seesaw, some schools really like Remind, some schools are using email, and it's not a problem to be communicating things multiple ways, but maybe polling your parents. How do they like to be communicated with? What are different ways? If I'm getting the same message every time by email, and then I get a text, and then I get a Seesaw push, and then I get a portal push, I might start to tune out a little bit. And so it's hard to meet everybody where they're at and then balance that also with ensuring people are reading what you're sending. And the reason you need to think about this as a school rather than just as a classroom is particularly if you have multiple students at this school, if one teacher is using one thing and another teacher is using another thing, that can be a lot for parents to manage. It will already be a lot to manage between the different schools as well too, but knowing that elementary distance learning would take kind of another layer of parent support, we want to make sure that at this level, we have very clear communication with parents. So really maybe have a critical conversation about what this would look like in a distance learning format. Do the work now to ensure that parents are signed up and know how to use the communication tools. It will be much easier to get parents signed up now, whether that's having, conferences just happened, but whether it was happening at conferences or having meetings or having them stop in or sending notes home or calling, it will just be a lot easier to set that up now than it will be later once we start distance learning. Not once, if, whoops, little slip, to get parents set up and then have them understand. When possible, there are tools that translate, including Seesaw, communication to parents, and research shows that when parents have communication translated into their language, it's not just about them understanding. It shows that the school cares and that the school acknowledges that they care about their students' education. And so it's an important cultural shift that we need to make, and that not everything needs to be sent home in English. We need to make strides so that parents can have things translated into their communication. And frankly, there's a lot of tools to do that now. And the communication needs to be both ways. Parents need to know how to reach back out to you. There needs to be a two-way format, and we need to be providing opportunities for parents to give feedback. If they're noticing their student is struggling, if they're not understanding what their student should be doing, if there's any issues, we want to provide venues so that parents have a way to communicate back with you. Here's one strategy. It's a little peek at the week. And the great part about the peek at the week is it can give a broad overview of the week. Maybe, obviously there's nothing in these boxes, but maybe on Wednesday in the morning meeting, students were going to bring one item from home for the morning meeting that reminded them of a memory. And so you would add that in the Wednesday little bucket here so that parents will know to make sure that they get that. And then maybe there's a specialist session on Tuesday, a live session. You just want to remind them because not every day they have that live session. There's a little peek. This is just a Google slide. The great part about this slide is that you can edit it. The bad part is that if you send it through JPEG, either in Seesaw or Remind, it's not translatable because the translating tools can't read a JPEG. And so that's something to think if you want to be inclusive. Maybe do this and also translate the message as well. I just want to pause and say too that it's important to have boundaries. I think that we're seeing and hearing some scary stories about parents maybe being too involved or parents jumping into live meetings, or it's a whole different situation when you don't necessarily know who is listening on the other end when you're doing your live sessions with students, and just making sure that you have those safe and healthy boundaries. And so that if parents have opinions about what you're doing or how the school is doing, that we provide venues for them. And if you ever feel like a parent has crossed a boundary, that you feel comfortable communicating that with your administrator so that they can step in and help out. I don't want to scare anybody, but we are seeing more parents sharing their opinion or communicating related to distance learning. And so we just want to make sure that everybody has safe boundaries in how that communication is happening. One way is that we can share with families how they can be helpful and be really concrete about. So again, one way to do that is to help families get to know the tools now. So just as we are sharing these tools and introducing these tools to our students, how can we be introducing these tools to our families now and sending out new little how-tos, little bits at a time, so they're not inundated when distance learning happens. Next, we can identify how to be involved at an appropriate level. We don't want distance learning to feel like homeschooling. We want parents to know that if it does feel like homeschooling, something needs to change, and we need to have a conversation about how that could be scaled back, and how the students could be scaffolded, how they could get more independent learning skills, or how you could be more concrete about what they need to do, and how the parents can take a step back and let their students have some ownership of their learning. They may need to support more at the beginning, but over time we'd like the students to have ownership of that learning. One thing they can help with is having consistent home routines that will aid in distance learning. Students thrive on consistency, and so any ways that they can ensure the student is waking up at the same time, getting ready for the day, and taking those brain breaks, having healthy meals, that will help in the distance learning. for them to establish a dedicated workspace for learning for their student, so the student knows when they're there it's time for learning, and that they can have a quiet place where the Wi-Fi works. Communicate that the school provided iPads should be used for learning and prioritized for the student during learning hours. And then again, encourage them to have their children take those active brain breaks. We don't want them to be breaking by using more screen time. So next I'm going to talk about Seesaw and the Family app. And just to note that these are two separate apps, but they are connected. And so the students and you engage in the class app, and then the families will have a separate app, but they'll see what's happening in the class app. I want to pause and say getting all the families onto the Family app right now might not be the right thing for your school. I know that several of the elementary schools already use the Family app, and that's great. I'm going to cover it because it's one of our core tools, and one of the elements of our distance learning is to kind of focus on those core tools. I want to show you what's available, and then you as a school can decide whether this is the way that you want to go. You might be looking at the number of tabs open on my computer and thinking, what is this girl doing? But this is a judgment-free zone, okay? Anyway, so back to Seesaw, teacher-parent communication. I'm just going to cover some of the highlights of why, what is involved in the Seesaw Family app. Basically, what will happen is when they join the app, they get to see what's happening, what their student is doing. They get to see the work that has been approved to go in the journal. It's one place where everything can happen. If I tab over to my class, this is how you actually invite parents. You would print the invites, or you could share an invite link that you can send to their email. And then I, as Jaden's mom, would only see Jaden's work, or I, as Sarah's grandfather, would only see Sarah B's work. So it's just something to note about the app. It provides that kind of safe communication tool. So the student, first of all, if you want to, would set it that only the work that you approve would be seen by them, but I think it's important for families to see all of their students' work. You can choose whether you want the family to be able to comment on their work as well, and you can choose if you need to approve those comments. The messaging system is right in there. You can private message individual family members. Unlike communication with students, it could just go to one family, or you can send announcements to the whole class. You can share photos, videos, links, and files in that communication. And so just a reminder, that is right here in your inbox. So you can add a family announcement. I don't have any families here, but essentially it looks the same way, where you send a parent announcement here. You can reach all the families in the language, and so one feature is that there are 55 languages that can be translated any sort of text, and then you can choose what language parents can get that translated within based on what's happening in the school. And then another thing is that Seesaw has already created the family engagement guide. And so this is something that you, your tech integrationist, your parents can use first to invite the families. The tutorials are already there, and then they also have a video in English as well as Spanish. And then how to support the families and help them learn about how to use Seesaw, as well as in-person events to help them understand Seesaw as well. And then again, just more tools for how that parents can be involved in their students' education. So what I like about it is it's all set up, ready to be trained if this is the direction that you decide to go. So as I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, it wasn't going to be a strict, this is what distance learning has to look like. But hopefully what was presented gives you enough to question and to consider at your building level. Do you have communication modalities set up that work, that are not sending newsletters home, sending notes home, not just relying upon phone calls, but actually have used the tools that we have available to us? Are families actively engaged in the channels that you have set up? That's an important thing to start using. Can we start practicing these before the possibility of distance learning would happen? And is there any additional training that families would need to use the tools that you have provided or that you want to use as well? Thank you for listening.